My wife told me to stay near the bar and not talk to anyone important. Those were her exact words. Not enjoy yourself. Not I'll introduce you around. Just stay near the bar, Gerald, and don't embarrass me in front of people who matter. I did what she said. I stood near the bar at the Grand Hyatt ballroom with a glass of water and watched Diane work the room. She was good at it. Confident handshake, easy laugh, the kind of eye contact that made people feel like they were the only person she wanted to talk to. After 22 years of marriage, I knew it was performance, but it was a convincing one. My name is Gerald Oakes. I'm 58 years old, and that night at the statewide business association Gala was the night everything I had accepted about my life stopped being acceptable. Diane had told me that morning I was coming with her. Not asked, told she was under review by the state bar's disciplinary board and needed to project stability. A husband standing nearby was useful. I was useful the way a piece of furniture is useful. You don't thank a chair for being there, you just sit in it. I put on my navy suit, the one I bought at a thrift store 4 years back for $60. Diane came downstairs in a $2,400 dress and looked at me the way she always looked at me at these things, like she was calculating whether I was going to be a problem. That'll do, she said. Stay near the bar. I'll find you when it's time to go. The ballroom was everything I expected. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, the kind of crowd that measures success in square footage and country club memberships. I knew maybe 3 people in that room, and none of them were the kind I wanted to talk to. I stood where Diane told me to stand, nursed my water, and watched the clock. I had been doing that for a long time, not just that night, for most of the last 20 years. Before Diane, I was a civil engineer. Good job with a firm in Denver. $85,000 a year, which was solid money in the early 2000s. When we got married, Diane was building her law practice, and we had Liam on the way. She suggested I take a step back from work, just temporarily, to handle the house and the baby while she established herself. Her income covered everything. It made sense on paper. 20 years later, I was still home. Liam was 30. Our daughter Paige was 27. Diane's practice had grown into a 7-attorney firm, and I was living on $300 a month that Diane transferred to my account for personal expenses. Everything else, the groceries, the utilities, the car insurance, she controlled. My name was on the joint accounts because she had needed a co-signer years ago, but I never touched those accounts without her knowing. That was one of the unspoken rules of our marriage. There were a lot of unspoken rules. I was thinking about none of this when the energy in the room shifted. It was subtle at first. Conversations dropped half a notch. Heads turned toward the main entrance. The kind of attention a room gives someone when it recognizes real authority, not the borrowed kind. A woman had walked in. She was around my age. Dark hair with silver at the temples. She wore a simple black dress and moved with the ease of someone who had stopped needing to prove anything a long time ago. The event coordinator moved toward her immediately. Someone near me said she was the keynote speaker, CEO of a major logistics company out of Colorado. I wasn't really listening to the name. I was watching her face. She was scanning the room the way you do when you're looking for someone specific, not networking. Not making eye contact for the sake of it, actually searching. Her gaze moved across the crowd in a slow, deliberate arc, and then it stopped on me. She went completely still. In the middle of that crowded ballroom, surrounded by 200 people in expensive clothes. She went still the way a person goes still when something impossible is happening right in front of them. I felt it in my chest before my brain caught up. I knew that face. I had not seen it in 35 years. It was older now, the way all of us are older. But the structure underneath was the same. The eyes were the same. The slight tilt of the head when she was working something out. She started walking toward me. Not toward the stage. Not toward the coordinator who was trailing her with a clipboard. Toward me, cutting a straight line across the room past tables and waitstaff and clusters of people who turned to watch her pass. Diane was nearby. She had spotted the woman coming and moved to intercept, hand extended, smile already loading. The woman glanced at Diane's outstretched hand and kept walking. She stopped in front of me. She looked at my left wrist, at the old watch I had worn under my sleeve, the one with the cracked crystal and the worn leather band. I saw her breath catch. Then she looked up at me and said my name, not Mr. Oakes. Not Gerald in the polite way strangers say it, just Gerald. The way someone says a name they have said to themselves 10,000 times when no one was listening. Nora, I said. She reached out and took both my hands the way she used to when we were graduate students in the engineering library at Colorado State. When the future was something we talked about like it was already ours. I've been looking for you for 35 years, she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. I never stopped. Behind her, I heard Diane's champagne glass hit the marble floor. The room did not go completely silent, but it went quiet enough that the sound of that glass hitting marble carried. Diane stepped between us. Her voice was controlled. That was always the first thing she reached for when something surprised her, control. Nora Callahan. What a coincidence. She said it, the way lawyers say things when they are buying time. Then she looked at me. Gerald, do you know this woman? We went to school together, I said. Nora looked at Diane for exactly 1 second, then she looked back at me. Can we talk? Tonight or whenever works for you? She held out a card. White, no logo, just her name and a number. The cell number was written on the back by hand. Diane took my arm. Not the gentle kind of taking. The kind that means we are leaving now and you do not have a vote in this. The ride home was 40 minutes of highway in silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that has weight to it. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark and let myself go back to something I had not let myself think about clearly in a very long time. Nora Callahan. We met in the fall of 1988 at Colorado State. I was in my first year of graduate school in civil engineering. She was finishing her undergraduate degree and starting a graduate certificate in structural systems. We ended up in the same Wednesday seminar. She sat 2 seats to my left and asked better questions than anyone else in the room, including the professor. I asked her to coffee after the 3rd session. She said yes before I finished the sentence. We were together from October 1988 until April 1989, 6 months that felt longer than the 6 years that came after them. We talked about everything, career plans, family, the kind of life we wanted. By February, I had introduced her to my parents. By March, she had a key to my apartment. By April, I had bought a ring. It was not an expensive ring. I was a graduate student living on a stipend, but I had saved 3 months for it and I knew it was right. We were sitting on the hood of my truck watching the sun go down over the Rockies when I asked her. She said yes before I finished that sentence too. We had 6 weeks of being engaged before everything stopped making sense. She started being harder to reach. Missed calls I could not explain. A distance I did not know how to name. I asked her what was wrong twice and she said nothing both times. Then one morning she called me and said she needed space. A week later she called again and said she thought we had moved too fast. 2 weeks after that, my sister Carol told me Nora had called the house looking for me, but it seemed distant, like she was going through the motions. A month after that, Carol told me Nora had gotten involved with someone from her program, that she had moved on, and it was probably better for everyone. I did not call after that. I packed the ring in a box and put it in my desk drawer. I finished my degree. I took a job with a firm in Denver. I told myself that some things just do not work out, that 6 months was not long enough to build anything permanent on, that I would be fine. I was not fine for a long time. But eventually I got good at acting like I was. 6 months after Nora, I met Diane at a dinner party through a mutual friend. She was direct and certain and completely different from the feeling of loose ground I had been standing on since April. I told myself that certainty was a good foundation. I told myself a lot of things in those years. We married in 1992. Liam came in 1994. Paige in 1997. I built a career I was proud of. Then in 2004 I walked away from it because Diane said it made sense and I did not have the energy to disagree. Lying in the dark that night after the gala, I was not angry yet. Anger came later. What I felt first was something closer to vertigo. Like the floor had shifted an inch and everything I had arranged on top of it had moved. I called Nora the next morning from my car in the parking lot of a grocery store. She answered on the second ring. We met at a coffee shop called the Blue Moon on 16th Street. Small place, quiet, exposed brick, the kind where nobody pays attention to anyone else. I got there 15 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner. She arrived exactly on time. We sat down and she ordered black coffee, same as she always had in graduate school, back when we would sit in the engineering library until midnight and refill the same cup 3 times. She did not ease into it. That was always her way. She looked at me across the table and said, I want to tell you what actually happened in 1989, and I need you to hear all of it before you say anything. I said, okay. She told me that in March of 1989, a few weeks after I proposed, she had started receiving calls from a woman named Diane. At the time, Nora did not know who Diane was. She knew I had met her once or twice through friends. Nothing more. Diane had told Nora that I was having second thoughts, that I had confided in mutual friends that the engagement had been impulsive, that I was too proud to say it directly, but that Nora would be doing us both a kindness by stepping back. Nora had not believed it at first. But the calls kept coming, and then my sister Carol called her. Carol told Nora I had said I felt trapped, that I was not ready, that I needed her to let me go without making it a confrontation. Nora said she sat with that for 2 weeks. She tried to reach me directly. She called the house twice. Carol answered both times and said I was not available, that I had said I needed space, that it was better to let things settle. By April, Nora had concluded that the man she was engaged to did not want to be engaged to her anymore, and that everyone around him was trying to protect her feelings by softening the message. She ended it. She moved to Denver after graduation and started her career, but she never fully let it go. In 1995, she tried to find me through the engineering program alumni office. The contact information on file for me had been updated to a P.O. box that went nowhere. In 2006, she hired a private investigator. The investigator reported back that Gerald Oakes was married, appeared settled, and had made no effort to maintain contact with anyone from his graduate years. She stopped trying after that. She built her company. She lived her life, but she had never fully stopped wondering. Then a year ago, a different investigator, sharper than the last one, had pulled the actual thread, and the thread led to my sister Carol. I sat across from Nora in that coffee shop and did not say anything for a long time. Then I asked, how much did she pay her? Nora said, $8,000. In 1989, I nodded. I picked up my coffee. I drank it. Okay, I said. Nora watched me. Okay, give me 3 weeks. I said, do not do anything yet. Can you do that? She looked at me for a long moment, then she said yes. I drove home from the Blue Moon and made dinner like nothing had happened. Diane was in her office with the door closed on a call with one of her partners. I could hear her voice through the wall, that measured courtroom tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while saying something that was not. I set her plate outside the door and went back to the kitchen and ate alone. That was a normal evening in our house. I was used to it. What I was not used to was sitting across from that normalcy with what I now knew sitting in my chest like a stone. I did not confront her. I did not ask questions. I did not change a single thing about how I moved through that house. I had 3 weeks. I intended to use them. The next morning, I started with what I had legal access to. My name was on every joint account in that house. Diane had added me as co-signer on the business operating accounts years ago when she was expanding the firm and needed a second signature for a line of credit. She had never removed me. Over the years, I had stopped looking at those accounts because Diane made it clear that the finances were her territory. But I had never been removed. That was her mistake. I pulled 3 years of statements. Not all at once. A few months at a time, printed at the library 2 miles from the house, paid for in cash from my $300 monthly allowance. It took me 4 days to see the pattern. There were transfers, regular ones, between the firm's operating account and a separate LLC I did not recognize. The LLC had a Denver address and a generic name. The transfers were sized just under the threshold that triggers automatic bank reporting. Someone had been careful, but not careful enough because the signature on the original LLC formation documents was mine. I had never signed those documents. I knew what my signature looked like. I had been signing my name for 58 years. The signature on those papers was close, good enough to fool a clerk, but not mine. I photographed everything. I kept the photos on a prepaid phone I bought with cash at a drugstore. I did not bring that phone into the house. On day 9, I called my friend, Philip Hartwell. We had known each other since the late 1990s. He was a building contractor, straight talking, no drama. I told him I needed a divorce attorney, someone good, someone discreet, and I needed the referral to come from him and not from anyone connected to Diane's professional circle. Philip did not ask a lot of questions. He gave me a name. I met with the attorney, a woman named Barbara Nolan, at her office on a Tuesday morning while Diane was in a deposition across town. I brought the photographs. I brought the account statements. I laid everything on the table and walked her through what I had found. Barbara Nolan looked at the signature documents for about 90 seconds. That's forgery, she said. If your signature appears on LLC formation documents you did not sign, that's document fraud at minimum. Depending on what the LLC was used for, it could be wire fraud. It could be tax fraud. It could be a federal matter. I told her about Nora, about Callahan Logistics, about the legal team Nora had quietly put on standby for the past 3 weeks. Barbara picked up her phone and made a call. 2 days later, Nora's attorneys and Barbara Nolan were sharing documents in a secure file transfer. The forgery evidence went to the State Bar Association's Ethics Division. A separate package went to the FBI field office in Denver that, as it turned out, already had an open file on Diane's firm, had been building it for 8 months. I had not known that. It meant I was not the only one who had been paying attention. I went home that evening and made dinner again. Chicken, roasted potatoes, the kind of meal Diane never commented on either way. She came out of her office at 6:30, sat at the table, looked at her phone and ate in silence. I watched her across the table and thought about 35 years. About a 23-year-old woman who had called my house twice and been told I did not want to be found. About $8,000 and a sister I had trusted without question. About 20 years of $300 a month and a suit from a thrift store and standing near the bar at a gala full of people who did not know my name. On the 18th day, I drove to Carol's house. She lived 40 minutes north of Denver, a small ranch house she had owned since the mid-1990s. I had been there dozens of times over the years for holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. I had always thought of Carol as someone in my corner. Older by 5 years, practical. The kind of person who told you hard truths because she thought you could handle them. She opened the door and knew immediately that something was different. I could see it in the half second before she arranged her face into a normal expression. I sat down at her kitchen table. I did not take my coat off. I said, "Tell me about Nora Callahan." Carol sat down across from me. She did not try to pretend she did not know what I meant. That told me everything. If there had been nothing to know, she would have asked me what I was talking about. Instead, she folded her hands on the table and looked at them. "Diane came to me in the spring of 1989, Carol said. She said she cared about you, and she was worried Nora was wrong for you. She said Nora was ambitious, that she would eventually leave you for a better opportunity, and that you deserved someone more stable." I did not say anything. She offered me $8,000. I had credit card debt. I told myself I was doing the right thing for you. Carol looked up. "I know that does not make it right." I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "You let me spend 35 years not knowing. You watched me marry Diane. You watched me give up my career. You came to my house for Christmas every year for 2 decades, and you never said a word." Carol did not answer that. There was no answer for it. I stood up. I put my coat back on. "I'm not going to pretend this did not happen," I said. "My attorney will be in touch." I walked out and drove home. That night I packed one bag. I put it in the trunk of my car, and I called Barbara Nolan to tell her I was ready. The next morning I was gone before Diane came downstairs. I drove to Philip's house. He had the guest room ready without me having to ask. That was the kind of friend he was. He handed me coffee, pointed at the room, and did not make it into a thing. That afternoon Diane was served. I was not there to see her face. I did not need to be. Barbara Nolan called me 2 hours later. "She's already contacted her partners at the firm," Barbara said. "Expect noise." There was noise. Diane called my cell phone 6 times in the first hour. I let all 6 go to voicemail. Her messages started controlled and ended somewhere considerably less controlled. Liam called that evening. His message was short and certain. He had heard his mother's version and he had decided it was the only version. I listened to it once and put the phone down. Paige called the next morning. She did not ask me to explain myself. She said, "Dad, are you somewhere safe?" I told her I was at Philip's. She said she would come for dinner on Friday. She did, and we sat at Philip's kitchen table and talked for 3 hours about things we had never talked about while I was living in that house. That dinner was worth more to me than I can explain. The legal process moved on its own timeline after that. Diane's attorneys filed motions. Barbara responded to them. The forgery documentation sat in the hands of people whose job it was to evaluate it, and they did their jobs. 6 weeks after I left the house, Diane received formal notice that her law license was suspended pending a full disciplinary investigation. The state bar does not move quickly on most things. On document fraud, they move. The FBI moved 3 weeks after that. I was at Philip's when Barbara called with the news. The charges included wire fraud, tax evasion, and document forgery. The LLC that had been using my forged signature was one piece of a larger structure Diane had been running for nearly a decade. Money coming in from sources that did not hold up to scrutiny, passing through real estate transactions, coming out clean on the other side. The FBI had been watching it for 8 months. My documentation had given them the final piece they needed on the forgery count. Diane's criminal attorneys immediately became her primary legal focus. The divorce proceedings dropped to a secondary concern, which meant that the aggressive posture her team had taken in the first weeks quietly collapsed. There were no more motions designed to freeze my access to assets. There was no more litigation strategy aimed at wearing me down financially. Her attorneys had bigger problems to manage. The divorce settlement, when it came, included a calculation Barbara had argued from the beginning. 20 years of foregone engineering income at $85,000 per year, adjusted for standard cost of living increases, came to just over $2.1 million in lost earnings. The court did not award me the full amount. It awarded me enough to start over without asking anyone's permission. Throughout all of it, I did not raise my voice at Diane once. I did not send her angry messages. I did not tell her what I thought of her at any point during the proceedings. She knew what she had done. I did not need to narrate it for her. Carol sent me a letter 4 weeks after I left, 4 handwritten pages. She talked about the debt she had been in, the way Diane had framed it, the story she had told herself for 35 years to make it bearable. She said she was sorry. She said she knew sorry was not enough. I read it once. I gave it to Barbara. The civil suit for tortious interference, which is the legal term for deliberately obstructing someone's personal relationships for financial gain, was filed the following week. I did not write Carol back. I did not call her. When the holidays came, I did not reach out. Some people interpret silence as cruelty. I think of it differently. I think of it as accuracy. Words would have suggested there was something to discuss. There was not. What Carol did had a cost. That cost had a legal expression. The civil suit was that expression. Everything else was between her and whatever she thought about at 3 in the morning. Nora and I had been meeting for coffee every week or two since the blue moon, not rushing anything. Talking the way people talk when they have a lot of years to account for and enough sense to take their time doing it. She told me about building Callahan Logistics from a 3-person operation in 1998 to the company it was now. I told her about the engineering projects I had worked on before 2004, the bridges and drainage systems and infrastructure work that I had been proud of and had walked away from for reasons that made less sense every time I examined them. One evening in early spring, we drove out to the foothills west of Denver. We sat on the hood of my truck, which I had bought secondhand 3 weeks after leaving the house, and watched the sun go down over the mountains. Same mountains we had looked at from the Colorado State campus in 1988. Still there, still the same, Nora said. I kept thinking about that watch. I looked at my wrist. The old watch she had given me in 1989, the one with the engraved initials on the back and the replaced crystal. I had worn it every day since she had it serviced. I used to wonder if you still had it, she said. When I saw it at the gala, I almost could not breathe. I never took it off, I said. Not once in 35 years. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, I know that now. The mountains did what mountains do. They stayed where they were and let the light change around them. We sat there until it was dark, and then we drove back to the city. Some things do not need a lot of words. 8 months after the gala, I walked into the offices of Callahan Logistics as a senior project engineer. Nora had offered me the position 2 months earlier. She had been straightforward about it, the way she was straightforward about everything. The company had infrastructure projects across 4 states. She needed someone with field experience who understood how to read a site and manage a build from the ground up. I had 15 years of that experience, even if I had spent the last 20 years not using it. The salary was more than I had made in 2004 when I left the industry. Better benefits. A real office with a window. My first morning, I took the elevator up to the 4th floor and found my name already on the door. Gerald Oakes, Senior Project Engineer. I stood in the hallway and looked at it for a moment, not a long moment, just enough to register that it was real. Nora was in a meeting when I arrived. Her assistant Sylvia Dunbar showed me around the floor, introduced me to the project managers, walked me through the current contracts. Everyone was professional and easy. Nobody treated me like the boss's personal project. They treated me like someone who was there to do a job, which was exactly what I was. Around noon, Nora stopped by my office. She leaned in the doorway with a coffee cup and looked at the watch on my wrist. Ready? She said. Been ready for a while, I said. She smiled and went back to her meeting. The divorce finalized 6 weeks later. The settlement reflected 20 years of lost earnings, adjusted and argued by Barbara Nolan over 4 months of proceedings. Diane's attorneys had pushed back hard in the beginning. By the end, they were managing a federal criminal case and had stopped pushing back on much of anything. I signed the final papers on a Thursday afternoon in Barbara's conference room. I drove from there to a small apartment I had rented 3 miles from the Callahan Logistics office. 2 bedrooms, good light in the mornings, enough room for my books, and a coffee maker and not much else. I stood in the middle of the living room that evening with a cup of coffee and looked out the window at the Denver skyline. Every dollar in my bank account was mine. Every decision I made from that point forward was mine. Nobody was going to tell me to stay near the bar. Paige came over that weekend with takeout and a plant for the kitchen windowsill. She said the apartment needed something living in it. We ate at the kitchen table and talked until almost midnight. Liam had not called since the early weeks. I did not chase it. Some distances close on their own schedule, and some do not close at all. Either way, it was his choice to make, not mine to manage. Nora and I took our time. We had dinner most weeks. We drove out to the foothills on weekends when the weather was good. We talked about the future the way adults talk about it when they have already learned what it costs to get things wrong. Carefully, but not fearfully. One Saturday morning in late fall, she came by the apartment with coffee and we sat at the kitchen table and just read. Her with a business journal, me with an engineering trade magazine, the way ordinary mornings go when 2 people are comfortable enough to be quiet together. I looked up at one point and thought, this is what I should have had 35 years ago. Then I thought, it is what I have now. That was enough, more than enough. Here's what I want to say to you, if you have been listening this whole time. If someone in your life has been making you smaller, cutting your access, keeping you near the bar while they work the room, pay attention to that. Not the story they tell about why it makes sense. The pattern underneath it. Control dressed up as practicality is still control. And if something was taken from you, a career, a relationship, a version of your life that should have been yours, do not go looking for a way to blow it up. Go looking for the paperwork. Go looking for what is already yours by right. Let the law do what the law is built to do. The truth does not need your help to survive. It just needs you to stop standing in front of it. I'm 58 years old and I'm starting over. It is not too late. It was never too late. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled.